So, welcome everybody. Lara Adler is with us today, and I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to having her on because, as you all know, we opened the food guide in this week's modules. And if you had an opportunity to actually go through that food guide, you'll see that one of the last pieces in the guide talks about what the triggers for autoimmunity, thyroid disease, sickness, and chronic conditions is environmental toxins, which is kind of sprinkled throughout the guide for you. Since I'm not the expert on this, I thought that having someone here that is the expert would be a great way to introduce you further to what could be going on with people if we have helped them to create a checklist and they're just not getting where they want to be with their health. This is a place that people need to be aware of, and it is actually even becoming more mainstream knowledge that environmental toxins are a big part of the picture of chronic disease and illness. So Lara is an environmental toxins expert and educator and a certified holistic health coach. So she understands this thing in a very well-rounded way. She understands coaching. She understands what we go through with our clients. She trains and educates practitioners within this community to better understand the links between the environmental chemicals in our world, how they're impacting disease. And this could be anything from weight gain, diabetes, endocrine disruption, infertility, so that, coaches and practitioners can better support their clients. So I really find it also fascinating that her students include direct sales consultants, which I thought was really unique. And these are people who are wanting to become more educated and articulate about the things that they're representing, the things that they're selling, which, that's good to hear because it's not a common thing, right?
Yeah.
So with that said, is there anything else you want to share with everyone about, what you do and who you are?
I'm a super nerd. I really just I self-identify as being a nerd. And, I think one of the things that I really love doing, because I, like you said, come from the health coaching space myself, and I was health coaching before I was doing this work, is that allows me to have a lot more insight into how we use the information. So I'm a really strong believer in, information on its own is great, but if you don't know how to use it or apply it, it's kind of useless. And in the health coaching space in particular, there's so many different programs and trainings that are total shiny objects for people that they want to get certified in this and certified in that. And they become excellent at accumulating information.
Yes.
But they oftentimes have yet to figure out how to apply it in a strategic manner. So I actually do both in the work that I do with my practitioner clients. Is I give them the education and help them, with their confidence and understanding what this whole world is and how to talk about it, but also helping them integrate it into the work that they're doing in a way that's strategic, that really gets people's attention in a way that's that they're open to, because there's a lot of sensationalism, there's a lot of clickbait and fear-mongering that happens in the health space in general, but definitely when it comes to toxins, because people tend to be real heavy-handed with the conversation. And so so that's sort of another aspect of the work that I do, because like I said, it's having the information. Information only gets you so far. If you don't know how to use it, it just sits there collecting dust.
I agree 100%. And part of what I do in this course and with my students is talk about that process, is the education, preparation, and then action processes.
Yes.
It is a 3-step proven approach that you use because it's teaching you how to deliver information in a way that people can understand it.
Yeah.
So you actually, as an expert in environmental toxins, become part of the first part of this process, the education part, teaching your clients that have done all the other things. Let's just say, and I mean, this is a big piece. I don't mean that this is the last piece, but
no. I totally,
many people it is they're but I've done everything. I eat paleo and I have hardwood floors and no more carpet and everything. And you look at their nails and you look at their hair and you think, well, how often do you dye your hair and how many pedicures are you getting and what kind of makeup is that? So that could be the missing piece for people.
Yeah, and that's actually how I talk about it. I say environmental toxins are the biggest missing piece of the conversation around health and wellness. We're talking about diet and exercise and stress management and sleep and, emotional eating and the joy that, fun and that kind of stuff. But we don't very often overlook this. And it's really not, I think there's a couple key reasons why that is. I think one, it's just not part of our training as whether we're health coaches or nutritionists or naturopaths or acupuncturists or chiropractors, massage, like whatever it is, physicians, it's just not part of the curriculum of training. Or if it is, it's an incredibly small sliver, where they might say pesticides are bad or these carcinogens like smoking is bad. But we really want to move beyond the super obvious stuff and get into the minutia, because, research is showing that the thousands of chemicals that we're exposed to every day are having a tremendous impact. So one, we're not being exposed to it in our trainings. So we don't have that core foundation of education behind us. And because of that, we don't really have even if we know it intuitively or we've done research on our own, health practitioners and health coaches often don't have the confidence to step out and be like, yeah, I can talk to you about this.
Yeah, I don't.
It's like a foreign language. So that's how I talk about it. It's a foreign language. And unless you know it, you're going to be real uncomfortable stepping forth.
Yeah.
And, when people try to go into this space on their own, they often just get so overwhelmed with research and figuring out who's right and who's not right and what's accurate and what's not accurate. And so, those are the key points or reasons why people are not, in my opinion, not actively talking about this. I know in the nutrition, especially in the health coaching space, like we totally get our panties in a bunch when we hear that your standard physician has only had like 19 hours or 14 hours of nutrition training in their entire career. And we're like, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
How can that be? Well, they actually get an average of 7 hours in environmental health. So it's like less than half. So despite the fact, there was just an article that came out earlier this week, which I know will be, it's what month is it? It's October. That found that just looking at a fraction of the endocrine disrupting chemicals that are known endocrine disruptors on the market and singling out 15 medical conditions has found that the economic impact of that between healthcare costs and lost wages is $340 billion to the U.S. economy every year.
That's crazy.
Because of 5%, less than 5% of all known, and those are just endocrine disruptors. That's not carcinogens or reproductive toxins, just endocrine disruptors.
Let's back up right there for just a moment, because some of the coaches that are on here today are just fresh coming out of school or are in health coaching school. And to remember, sometimes the schools that people are going to are a bit lightweight in that type of topic. So I know what an endocrine disruptor is, but and we're going to teach more about it in week 8. I've got Andre Nakayama coming on to talk, and hopefully Shannon Garrett and Stacey Robbins. But I want you to give us a general idea. What does it mean to the coaches, and how can they talk to their clients about what endocrine disruption really is? Sure.
So, and obviously that's like the keystone, like understanding this is a big part of it, at least when we're having the conversation about endocrine disruption. So, the endocrine system, and Andrea, when you get to her class, is probably going to blow your minds with talking about the endocrine system, because that's what she does.
Yeah.
And she'll get into a lot more detail, but generally speaking, the endocrine system really regulates nearly every single body function, from mood to metabolism, weight gain, fetal growth and development, adolescent growth and development, adult growth and development, menopause, aging, like everything. Your thyroid hormones regulated by the endocrine system, all the things. So things that disrupt that, and I'll talk about how that happens, are not ones that we want to be adding to our body, right? We don't want to be disrupting this really delicate system. And in our bodies, the endocrine system is designed to work at extremely low levels. So when a girl goes through puberty, or when somebody has their period and they're having a hormonal swing, that's the endocrine system working. It's not that we're dumping gallons of endocrines, estrogens, testosterones, progesterones into the bloodstream. There's tiny, tiny amounts, and we know that they can have a dramatic effect in anybody who's been around, a teenage girl in puberty knows that to be true, or has experienced menopause knows that, like, the effect is big. The effect is big. And so essentially the endocrine system works like a lock and key. So there's these locks that are your endocrine receptors, and there's a finite number of them. Let's just say 100, right? And that's all you got. And then there are keys, and the keys will lock or unlock these locks and turn on or turn off, different actions in the body. And there's many of the chemicals that we're exposed to every single day are able to act as those keys. They just kind of go in sneaky into the body and pretend to be these keys. And what they're doing is they're opening and locking things that they otherwise shouldn't have.
Okay.
So this is how they're interfering. So many of the endocrine disrupting chemicals are synthetic estrogens.
Mm-hmm.
So if people have estrogen dominance, which is really common, and Andrea might talk about that since I know she does a lot. Estrogen dominance is really common, and not just in women, in men. So if we've got like men with man boobs.
Oh, I talked about this the other day. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Men with man boobs is actually somewhat reflective of an estrogen dominance in men. And so many of the chemicals that we're exposed to are synthetic estrogens.
Mm-hmm.
And exposure to these estrogens at different periods in someone's life can have a dramatic impact on all the things. So weight, resistant weight loss for people who can't lose those last few pounds. Sometimes that's estrogen related. You've got fertility issues. So people are experiencing fertility issues. That's both men and women. Any kind of hormonal, obviously. So thyroid disorders, super, super common in women. Hashimoto's, autoimmune conditions. All of these things are affected by these endocrine disrupting chemicals.
Okay. So when you say the estrogen, so we're talking about phytoestrogens, like plant estrogens. We're talking about xenoestrogens, which are the other. Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing. So xenoestrogens essentially just means foreign estrogen.
Right.
There's another term for it that I'm blanking on. Oh, endogenous or exogenous. So endogenous toxins are ones that our bodies create. I'm sorry, endogenous toxins, which our body does actually create endogenous toxins. So toxins that are byproducts of metabolism or what have you. And exogenous are external toxins that are coming in. So all xenoestrogens or foreign estrogens would be considered an exotoxin.
Yeah. Okay. So it's endo created by the body, exo coming from outside. So creams, things like that, anything that's penetrating our skin, our eyes, or anything like that would be something.
Yeah. So there's actually 4 routes of exposure that chemicals get from sort of out there to in the body. It's ingestion, so ones that we eat, inhalation, ones that we breathe in, absorption, ones that we absorb through our skin. And the 4th one is less common, and that's intravenous. So if you're in a hospital setting, there's chemicals that are found in the blood bags and IV tubing and things like that. And so,
I've never thought about that.
Yeah. So sadly, infants that are in NICU, I know it's really sad, especially because I've got a good friend who just had 2 twins, and they're in NICU. They've been in NICU for 2 weeks. So NICU babies have a really, I don't want to say a high dose, but they have a dose of endocrine disrupting chemicals, primarily from the materials that they're surrounded by to help them flourish. So it's a really frustrating situation.
The plastic beds that they're laid in, right?
Yeah, and those plastic incubators, those are, hard, clear polycarbonate plastics.
Gosh, I never even thought about the hospital stuff. Yeah. So, okay. So that's one
it's not as big of a piece. And obviously it's not a piece that very many of us can actually do anything about.
Right.
So
but it is.
The other ones.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about, I like the topic of the soy because it's a big deal out there. Like Kayla Daniels, of course, wrote the book, The Whole Soy Story.
Yep.
Lots of people don't understand the difference between what unfermented and fermented soy does to the body. Like some people are confused about that. Is that something you can talk about? I know we're not going to go too in depth about things that we eat or anything, but it is a common question from people. They say, well, what's the difference? Why can't I have fermented soy, but regular soy affects my hormones? How come that is different? What's the difference?
So it's an interesting question that I probably am not the best person to answer, because most of the environmental chemicals or the toxins that I'm addressing in my work are not natural ones.
Okay.
With the exception of sometimes addressing mold to a certain extent, it's more of the man-made chemicals.
Yeah.
So I don't really get into the conversation specifically about soy, but if we're talking about chemicals that we ingest, I'll talk about pesticides till the cows come home. I'll talk about, contamination of seafood with mercury and PCBs and dioxins and also pesticides. So those are, that's sort of my wheelhouse when it comes to foods that we're ingesting, and also contaminants in drinking water. That's another huge one, especially with what's happened with Flint, Michigan's drinking water earlier this year.
Yeah, and there's some people that still aren't aware of that. Why don't you do a recap about that, the water, and then let's talk a little bit about filtration too, because that's another big topic right now.
Sure. So that's, it's actually it's a much bigger topic. I can give you a synopsis. It's a much bigger topic because we could spend, I actually do spend 2 weeks just on this topic in one of the courses I teach, because it's a big bucket of worms. But Flint, Michigan, I think that started happening in 2014. I don't remember actually when it started, but they switched the source of their water because they were trying to save a buck. And because of that, long story short, turns out that there was a tremendous amount of lead that was showing up in the drinking water that people didn't know about until it was discovered. And now it's really galvanized the nation's attention. It was a massive, and it still is, an ongoing issue in Flint, Michigan. People are being forced to drink bottled water. They're told not to cook or bathe in the water. Like, that's how contaminated it is. This is kind of third world country situation out there. Flint, Michigan is not a wealthy community by any stretch. And it's the levels of lead in the drinking water are such that children are being diagnosed as being lead poisoned, which is significant. Lead is a potent neurotoxin. There is absolutely no safe level of lead. The World Health Organization and the CDC both say that the only safe level is 0. So when children have high levels of lead, it impacts the development of neural development. So IQ loss, loss of IQ points is a big one. You also, interestingly, have a lot of behavioral issues that result, including things like increased anger and violence. So when lead was taken out of gasoline in the 1970s, 10 years later, violent crime across the United States dropped.
Wow.
So they're able to it's super fascinating. And, I always tell people, and I will only mention this as a one sentence so that we don't go down this rabbit hole, but environmental toxins and environmental chemicals is not just a human health issue. It's a social justice issue. It's a class issue. It's a race issue. People of color and minorities are disproportionately exposed, and Flint, Michigan is a great example of that. It's a primarily minority community, and it's not okay. So because of this issue in Flint, Michigan, water municipalities around the country have started taking a closer look at their own water and going, well, ew, what do we have in our water? And almost everywhere they're looking, they're finding high levels of lead. Reason our drinking water infrastructure is super outdated. It's just old. We've got lead pipes. We've got just poor, we don't have the money to fix it, or at least money hasn't been set aside to fix it. So lead is just one contaminant in drinking water. It's
what about
not
copper? Talk to me about copper too. With copper pipes?
Copper pipes typically don't leach. From what I understand, copper pipes are actually okay. And don't leach and aren't a concern from the heavy metal standpoint. The biggest concerns with drinking water are what they use to disinfect the water, which obviously is important because disinfecting our drinking water is why we don't have cholera anymore.
Right.
That's important. I don't want to get like cholera or dysentery from my drinking water.
No.
But the chemicals that they use, which are either chlorine or chloramine, which are the most common ones, they stay in our drinking water system. So you can, smell chlorine. You usually can't smell chloramine, which is just a combination of chlorine and ammonia. Both of these chemicals react with naturally occurring components of drinking water. So just like leaf matter, just tiny microscopic matter in the water. That's always going to be there. It's not a big deal. But the chlorine or the chloramines react with that, and they form what are called disinfection byproducts. And these disinfection byproducts, and there's hundreds of them, are known carcinogens.
Mm.
So,
okay. So is chlorine, now I am so sensitive when I go to restaurants, I can smell the chlorine in the water. I won't drink it. I'm like,
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So, here's something though that I was wondering now, is chlorine a halide? Remind me, because I'm not a biologist kind of person, but doesn't chlorine affect the thyroid, or is there a competition for iodine anywhere in that mix?
I don't think so. I'm not sure on that front. I may have it in my notes somewhere, but
it's okay.
I'm thinking that I know that there's something else that interferes. I mean,
bromide is a halide for sure. That competes with iodine. Okay.
Yeah, and fluorine, so fluoride.
Yeah.
Sure. And fluoride is a really big one, and people often get, yes, fluoride is added to some municipalities, but not all. Even if it's not added, it may still be present in your drinking water because fluorine is a natural element, and fluoride can end up in your drinking water just because it's in contact with the Earth's crust in an underground aquifer. What I always tell people is to ask for their local water quality report. Every municipality is required to send it out every single year. You can just, if you don't have it, they send it in the mail usually. If you don't get it, you can just call your water utility and send it. I saw there was a question pop up about well water.
Yeah, and I'm writing that on here so these people are remembering.
Well, water is actually different because well water is private, and it's not going to, there's no agency or utility that manages well water. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's on well water, they typically have to pay for testing themselves.
Okay.
And you have to do that, every year, every other year, or how, frequently. And almost always it should, it will require some degree of filtration.
Okay. So what's the difference then? I mean, like, besides the fact that it's not chemically treated or it's not tested, is it healthier for you? Well water better for you?
Not necessarily. So well water can have bacteria overgrowth, can have bacteria in it. It can have, runoff from pesticides or industry that just seeps into the groundwater. And because it's not overseen by anyone, it's totally variable. So water quality is like a thumbprint, super unique. So if I picked up and moved, 100 miles away, the water filter that I currently have may not be as useful for me. So, people always ask me, like, what's the best water filter to buy? And I can't answer that. And I won't answer that. There's some good options, but it's only good. If you don't know what's in your water and you're like, I'm just going to get a filter. Well, how do you know if the filter cartridge that or the system that you're using is filtering out the contaminants that you have? Because not every filter filters out everything. So some are good at filtering out some things and some are better than others. So I, for example, have a 3-stage filtration system. Some people require a 5-stage filtration system. Some people, require UV, so like UV light to kill bacteria and microorganisms. And a lot of people with well water will install a UV filter in addition to a carbon filter. And if there's fluoride, then they'll get another type of filter.
Okay. So this is
why I spent 2 weeks on this.
Yeah. But this is really, really good and important because it comes up all the time in my other groups. I am always being asked, what kind of filter do you recommend? What do you use? We're moving, we're going here. I've heard the water's terrible, or I can smell chlorine. Like, it's always a topic of conversation.
Yeah. So the sort of crib sheet or cheat sheet that I tell people is like, one, you have to look at your water quality report, and based on that, decide like, oh, I've got high levels of X, Y, and Z. I'm going to make sure that whatever filter I buy specifically addresses those contaminants. Two, that I just lost my train of thought. Where'd that go? Train just went out the other end. So one is your water quality report. Two is do your homework, and don't buy like an out-of-the-box filter just kind of blindly, because I've wasted money on filters and I'm like, yeah, I need this. And then I'm like, oh, but my water doesn't actually have fluoride at all. So why would I spend the extra money on a fluoride filter if I don't have it? So you have to know what your contaminants are. Second, if you're on a budget, and if the only thing that somebody can afford is a Brita fine. It's better than nothing,
Yeah.
right? So don't feel like you have to aim for the most expensive product right out of the gate.
Right.
It might be overkill. So you might actually have really good water. Like I lived in New York City, and New York City actually had pretty good water when I lived there, and I could drink tap water. It didn't always, but like for years I did, and it tasted fine. It didn't taste gross.
Yeah.
And so you have to know your water. Don't worry about spending the most dollars, and don't buy something based on somebody's claim that it takes out everything.
Right. That's a good point, because there's
a lot of marketing.
Those claims.
There are a lot of marketing in this space. So I saw somebody had commented that they had a Berkey. Berkeys are great.
I have one too.
Berkeys, they're great. But again, they have the option to buy specific cartridges or filters that you add into Berkey if you need it. So even still with something like Berkey, you have to look at your water quality report and be like, do I even have fluoride? Because if I do, I'm going to spend the extra money to get the fluoride filter from Berkey.
Yeah.
So that part will never change. The know your water part will never change. Reverse osmosis filtration systems are good. They filter out almost everything, which is great, but they also strip the water of minerals.
Yes.
And they make it what's called hard or aggressive water. So a lot of people don't like that. It's also wasteful. So if, California has been experiencing a really terrible drought for, I don't know, at least a year and a half, 2 years now. And those systems sometimes waste at least half of the water that, if you have 1 cup of water that you can drink, it took 2 cups to make that, and the other cup goes in the drain. Oh. So it's wasteful.
Okay.
Not all systems are like that. Some are more efficient than others, but reverse osmosis tends to be wasteful. And sometimes people who have reverse osmosis will remineralize the water.
That's what we do.
The other side, which is fine. So
now I feel bad. I'm wasting water because we have reverse osmosis through the house, but then we also have a Berkey.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, when we moved into this house, they said the water filter was brand new, right? It's up in this weird closet. We were like a bunch of spectators when we looked in the closet. Me and my realtor, my husband, we were like, what is that? Is that a vacuum? Is that a vacuum system? Like, what is it? We had to call the other realtor and ask them, is this a water thing? But I'm starting to smell chlorine, and we've only been here a couple of months, and it's supposed to be good for a long time, but I smell it. I smell it when I wash my hair. I smell it in my shower.
Yeah.
I'm wondering
to check those filters.
Yeah. And
that's the things people forget about that stuff. I mean, think about like your refrigerator water filter. Most refrigerators actually have a water filter.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic, but that, like, nobody ever changes that. Who changes that?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that's ever changed. They're like, I've got to change my fridge filter. I do see that there's a question, something about mentioning Brita and storing in plastic. Good point. Thank you. You're obviously on it. So yes, if somebody has a Brita, and that's what they can swing, then I typically will just encourage them to decant the water into a glass pitcher and put it in the fridge. One of the things that's important to understand about things like plastic, and this likely applies to many things in addition, but who remembers, and this is a rhetorical question because Carmen, you're the only one I'm talking to.
You guys can answer in the chat box though.
Yes. So, from like 6th grade physics, if somebody had physics in 6th grade, or chemistry, when they had like the frying pan of beads, and the faster, the more heat is applied, the faster those beads move, and those beads are like molecules, right? And that ice is frozen water, as those molecules are barely moving at all, and they're locked in place. And so when we're thinking about chemicals and plastics and their ability to leach and migrate out, there's a couple of things that increase the ability for chemicals like these endocrine disruptors, whether it's BPA or phthalates or some other kinds, in plastics. And this is all kinds of plastics. It's heat, oil, acidity, and abrasion. So these are the 4 things that can increase. So everybody, for example, and I'll come back to the Brita filter, but everybody, for example, has seen or owned in their life those plastic food storage containers that are stained orange. And they're like,
I don't use those. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And no matter how many times you washed it, it was always orange. Well, the reason why is it because it held usually pasta sauce or some sort of tomato soup.
Yeah.
And tomato soup is acidic.
Mm.
Tomatoes are acidic. It's typically oily because there's oil in it. And it's usually hot when you put it into the container.
Okay.
So it's hot, oily, and acidic, which is 3 of the 4 things.
And the other one was abrasive, right? I'm
abrasive. So if you're like scrubbing it with a sponge, you're physically altering the surface of the plastic. So, you know, glass, the molecules in glass are really tightly bound. They're not going anywhere. Plastic, the molecules they shed all the time. That's just the nature of plastic. And so, and we know this if we look at like an old electric cord to an appliance that's like 20 years old, and it's often stiff or cracked.
Yeah.
And it's because the chemicals that previously had lent the flexibility and resiliency just kind of fell out over time on their own. So when we're looking at those plastic food storage containers that are stained orange, what happens is the heat, oil, and acidity from the sauce actually kind of eats into the physical structure of the plastic. Okay. And the orange oil molecules literally embed themselves into the physical structure of the plastic, which is why they won't wash out.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I always wondered why that was.
Yeah, that's why.
You know, you lend a piece of a glass container with a plastic lid to someone when with food in it, when you're giving them something and it comes back and it's got an orange lid, you're like, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the inverse of that is those plastic molecules are now in your sauce, right? It's not a one-way transaction.
Yeah.
It's a two-way transaction.
Exchanging energy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the heat there is a big issue. So, you know, going back to the Brita, when plastics are stored in cold environments like a refrigerator or a freezer, the rate of those molecules shedding is going to be reduced because they're not moving as fast. Okay. So I always look at those. I'm like, you know what? Like I have Ziploc bags of frozen bananas in my freezer. Like I'm not really going to worry about those.
Right.
I'm not pouring hot soup, which I used to do, by the way, many years ago, into Ziploc bags. Mm-hmm. Yep, because they made great serving sizes. I'm not pouring hot soup into a Ziploc bag and then like putting it in the freezer.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah. So, you know, storing your filtered Brita water in a glass pitcher is a great idea, but like, I like to try to put things on a totem pole of like, what are like, if you don't have a glass pitcher and you just constantly are keeping it in the fridge, like you can worry less about that one.
Right.
And so that's my take on things that go in the fridge and in the freezer. Like, you know, all the frozen fruits and things like that I buy, they all come in plastic and I don't freak out about it. I'm just like, okay, great.
Yeah. There are just some things that we have to relax about, and the things that are the least things to worry. So Veronica's asking, and in a minute we're going to switch completely over to another topic because I know someone had asked me to bring it up. But Veronica, and you just said a few minutes ago, people ask me what's the best kind of water filter, and I can't tell you. So I'm going to remind Veronica, we are talking about, you know, it's going to be different wherever you live. Whatever is in your water, you have to consider what's in your water to figure out what's best for you in that location. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. And so, you know, generally speaking, you know, carbon filtration is going to always be a part of any filter. Mm-hmm. Reverse osmosis would be like, that's filtering out everything, but it's also filtering out all of the minerals that make water taste good. Yep. So if you've ever wondered why like Poland Spring or Dasani, that Pepsi's drink bottled water, or Evian taste different, it's because the mineral profile is different. And in Europe, the mineral profile of water is typically harder. So that's why like European bottled waters tend to be like, I can't drink Evian. I think it's revolting. Yeah. Because the minerals that are naturally occurring where that water is pulled from, is just a different profile. And, you know, companies like Pepsi or Coca-Cola or whoever it is that makes Dasani, that water is really sweet because Americans like things sweet. Yeah. And so it's a palate thing, but it's also, you know, those minerals are important, magnesiums, potassiums, and whatnot. You know, on the subject of bottled water, I don't drink bottled water. Most people don't realize that bottled water is less regulated than tap water. Wow. Less regulated. And in fact, most bottled water companies, at least a portion of their water is actually just tap water. What? Yeah. Yes. Including Poland Spring. Like a portion of their, like only 20 or 30% actually comes from Poland Spring. The rest of it's just city tap water.
Okay. Ew.
So, yeah. So like the whole industry is like this, just, it's a big joke.
Yeah.
They charge, I think the markup for bottled water is like 1,900%.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's
it's like, why does anybody buy it? The only time I buy bottled water is if I have to fly and the airport doesn't happen to have their, filtered water fountains. Where I live, they do. So.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So I would say, so one thing that I think is important, of course, is with our clients, when we're working with our clients, is knowing how are you getting your water? Like, how much water are you drinking? Is it filtered? Like, what's the process of your water? I think that's a big player too when it comes to working with clients.
It's especially if somebody's dealing with thyroid issues and just finding out whether or not there's fluoride in someone's water. So from a health coach perspective, if somebody, especially if it's in a one-on-one coaching program, and it's a higher end program, then I would, as the coach, I would actually go look up that person's water quality report for them. Like they don't necessarily need to know all of the minute details. They may want to, but it's, I think, as a service to your client, say, you know what, I'm going to go look up that water quality report. Here are the things that your water has. Like, I would recommend these types of filters.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea.
So it's just a service that's a tremendous value add.
Yeah.
And, if it's a group program, maybe not. But if it's private coaching, then, absolutely.
Reduces the workload for them and the stress of having to figure it out. That's a great idea.
Because it is a little bit tricky. And that's why, like I said, I spent 2 weeks on it in one of my classes.
Okay.
There was something else that I wanted to mention. Is that, if you are working with clients, and I'm not sure what your next question is, Carmen, but like I was saying earlier, there's a totem pole of like, what are the things that we should be worrying about the most? And what are the ones that we can be like,
that was kind of going to be my question. And I wanted to throw some skin stuff in there too.
Yeah. So, what I always say is start in the kitchen. So look specifically at chemicals that are happening in the kitchen. And the reason is, as health coaches, you're already talking to your clients about making upgrades and changes in this room. So it's not a big stretch for them. And, what happens often is, somebody might, whether they're coming to seek the support of a health coach for weight issues or thyroid issues or whatever, sometimes the health coach wants to start right away with the skin stuff. And your client might be like, but I have like weight to lose. Why are we talking about shampoo?
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't understand that there's a connection. And so health coaches, it's part of our job. And this circles back to, having the information is great, but if we don't know how to use it well, we can just bore people to death.
Yeah.
Is creating what I call a bridge of relatability. So if somebody has a thyroid issue and you want to talk about drinking water, then you create a bridge between that person's specific issue that they're seeking support around and connecting it to the subject that you want to talk about that is important, rather than just being like, today we're going to talk about chemicals in your water. And they're going to be like, why?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
So if you say, we're here working on your thyroid and there's all kinds of things that we're going to be doing, and some of them are going to be related to food and some of them aren't going to be related to food, but it's important for us to address all of them. So I'm not sure if you know this, but there are certain chemicals or contaminants that are found in drinking water that can directly affect the thyroid. So I want to make sure that we're able to sit down and talk about that. And then people are going, oh, awesome. Let's do that.
Yeah,
but if
great.
you just said, let's talk about water, or let's talk about your makeup, they're not going to understand why. So it's just, sometimes that bridge is sometimes just a sentence.
Yes.
We're going to take you from here to here.
Right.
So super important.
Yeah, it is. And that's a good point too, is helping them to understand that if there is fluoride in their water, it does compete with that element of iodine, which the thyroid needs to be healthy. It almost locks the plug up. So iodine can't get in. You don't have to explain all that. You just have to.
No. Yeah, and what's interesting is, there's in Europe, I think this was up until the 1950s or 60s, fluoride was actually prescribed as a thyroid suppressant. And the dosage that was given often is not dissimilar from the levels of fluoride that we have in our drinking water. Wow. So if we're looking sort of, and there's not like, studies, I mean, there are plenty of studies that connect fluoride with thyroid health issues. But if we sort of back up and look globally at the country and we see how many people are dealing with thyroid problems,
Yeah.
like it's epidemic levels. And if we're getting chemicals in our drinking water, among other places, that are suppressing thyroid function, then maybe we need to address that.
Yeah, I know. I agree 100%, 100%. It's a big topic. It's why I make the whole entire last week of my course is about thyroid.
Good.
Because
Yeah.
people need to understand it.
Yeah. So, going back to this totem pole of where do we start, I always say start in the kitchen. And the phrase that I use is it's because it's where your clients are already flexing their healthy muscle. Like they're already working out in that room. So
Right.
It's not a stretch to bring other aspects of what they're upgrading into the conversation. So I always start with pesticides and really making sure that people are articulating not just that it's important to eat organic as much as possible, but why.
Okay.
Right. And again, connecting these things to what the person is struggling with. And the reality is that pesticides are really linked in some way or another to nearly every health condition, whether it's thyroid problems, cancers, weight gain, diabetes, autism, ADHD, like all of these things have some link to pesticides. What I tell people, practitioners, to talk to their clients about is the environmental working group's Dirty Dozen Clean 13 or Clean 15. I think they changed it now.
Mm-hmm.
And really explaining to people that if they only ate organic versions of the items on the Dirty Dozen list, people can still reduce their circulating pesticide levels by 80 to 90%.
Wow.
In 3 to 5 days. In 3 to 5 days. So there have been a number of studies that have looked at switching people to a mostly organic diet, not even an exclusively organic, but a mostly organic diet, both in children and adults, and have found an 80 to 90% reduction in less than a week.
That's huge.
So that's a no-brainer, but explain that to people so they go, oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I know plenty of moms that are so overwhelmed and freaked out about everything they feed their kids. And they know if they can at least abide by that rule, they're doing an amazing job.
So that list, isn't that on the ewg.org? Is that where that resource is? And let's ask this. We got a question from Natalia. Okay. Can you recommend a source that covers basic knowledge about the chemicals that are most affected by to suggest to clients? So if we wanted to educate them and provide them with resources.
Yep. Environmental Working Group is an excellent resource.
Okay. And I'll type that in.
I think it's just ewg.org.
Yeah.
So pesticides are the first thing that I would start with. The second thing would be the plastics. So all the plastic food storage containers, the plastic drinking glasses and plates for little kids, the plastic spatulas, the plastic pasta strainers, all of it. It's pervasive in our kitchens. We don't even really realize it. So the exercise that I encourage my health coach clients to use with their clients is to just ask them, once you've had this conversation about, there's chemicals and plastics that might be interfering with what's happening with you, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to chip away at the things that might be contributing, and this is one of them. And just ask them to stand in their kitchen, open up all their cabinets, and just look. Don't throw anything out, don't do anything, just look at all the plastic. And people don't realize, they're like, oh my God, I have plastic measuring cups, plastic mixing spoons, mixing bowls.
That's awful.
Plastic.
Yeah, I had a client that had 60 stadium cups, 60 plastic stadium cups. They're doctors of veterinary medicine, so everywhere they went,
Right.
I was like, okay, oh my gosh. She has ulcerative colitis. She has a bleeding disorder. She has all these problems. So that was a really big clean out for her. Boxes and boxes went to Goodwill. So that's a great point. So let me ask you this while we're talking about that. The BPA, I remember a couple of years ago, I know it's like one of those
favorite comment. It's my favorite subject.
Favorite subject. Yes. Okay. So is it true? And I read this a couple of years ago that BPA is more toxic. BPA free is more toxic than non-BPA.
Okay. So here's what happened. And this is super common and very reflective of what happens in in the world because of our not so awesome chemical policies, federal government policies. So BPA, or bisphenol A, is an endocrine disrupting chemical that acts as a synthetic estrogen. It's linked to genital birth defects, early onset puberty, breast cancer, testicular cancer, low sperm counts, thyroid disorders, weight gain. It's an obesogenic chemical, so it's directly, like, it's got a bad laundry list. And BPA is it's not in all plastics. It's primarily found in rigid, clear plastics. So things like the Vitamix, I know, I'm sorry, I have one too.
I don't make soup in it anymore, though, I can tell you that.
Well, we can talk about that, because that's, as health coaches, we all have, whether it's a Vitamix or a Blendtec or whatever, our food processor bowls, the little clear glass-like drinking glasses for kids, like all of those things, like IKEA plastic is what I call it.
Okay.
And bisphenol A, like these other chemicals, leaches out. And I think it was in 1990, no, I'm not sure exactly what year it was, 2006 or 7, maybe a little before that, there was a huge uproar about BPA in babies' bottles. And that's really what started the whole BPA awareness. And people found out there was a BPA in babies' bottles, and that it was leaching out into the milk that people would feed their infants, which undoubtedly and understandably people were outraged by. And so you literally had like moms with their strollers showing up on the lawns of, their senates demanding that this change. And so, and writing at all the, baby bottle companies. And so manufacturers started to phase BPA out. And that's what started it, is the baby bottles. But it's since now leached into all these other, pun intended, leached into all these other areas of plastics. And what manufacturers have done is simply replace BPA, bisphenol A, with another chemical in the bisphenol family called BPS, like Sam. So, and there's dozens of types of bisphenols. So bisphenol A is just one. And so, all these manufacturers switched from bisphenol A to bisphenol S. And they're like, yes, it's BPA free. It is. It's legitimately BPA free. It's just they didn't tell you that they've swapped it out with BPS. And new research is finding that BPS is quite possibly worse than BPA.
Okay, that's where that came from.
That's the kicker. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that there are companies like Vitamix and Blendtec that use a specific type of polycarbonate plastic called Triton copolymer. And without getting into the details, if you just type in Triton copolymer BPA in Google, there's some incredible, Mother Jones has done some great articles on this. NPR has done a couple pieces on this. There was essentially a court case about the company who manufactured Triton copolymer sued a researcher who had done a lab, owns a lab and also owns a plastic company where he makes plastic that's certified estrogenic activity free. So it's not just BPA free, it's free of all estrogenic activity.
Okay.
And they did a study, this research scientist had done a study looking at all these different types of plastics, including ones that claimed that they were BPA free, and found that nearly every single type of plastic leached some kind of estrogenic active chemical. It may not have been BPA, but something that was estrogenically active, which is really what we're on about this whole conversation.
Right.
And Triton didn't like it, so they sued them because they're like, no, ours is estrogenic free. And it was settled in Triton's favor in a court case. But if you read through the Mother Jones articles about this, you'll see that it's not quite as cut and dry. And there's a lot of, money and influence, and, you've got a jury of the average citizen who's trying to make a finding on really complex chemistry.
Yeah.
Which
overwhelming.
So anyway, with those types of plastics, like the Vitamix and the Blendtecs and the food processor bowls, here's my take. My guess is that anybody who owns and has spent hundreds of dollars on one of those blenders is not putting Twinkies and Ho-Hos in there, right? They're putting in hemp seeds and chia seeds and goji berries and organic spinach and making all these great drinks. So do that, and don't worry about the blender, because what you're putting into the blender and then consuming is far healthier than the impact that, or the negative impact that exposure might have. With the caveat of don't ever put those types of any plastics in the dishwasher. So hand wash only. Don't use the scrubby side of your sponge. Remember, abrasion is one of the things that increases.
Right.
If possible, don't grind things in those that are extremely hard. So if you have like to grind spices, get a stainless steel spice mill instead of grinding it. And don't put hot, oily soup into your Vitamix. To puree it, get an immersion blender or a stick blender that's stainless steel that you can put directly into the pot. So these are all just a sort of simple workarounds that we can use, and that you can talk to your clients about, you know, how to reduce their exposure in light of these certain plastics that there's nothing we can do about.
Right. Okay. I know we're getting close on time, but I don't want to, do you have about 10 more minutes? Because I want to cover and talk about skin products and makeups and things like that. It's you know, it's been a topic of conversation. Yesterday, I think it was, someone was talking about in one of my groups, asking about Beauty Counter, you know, the multi-level marketing beauty product. Someone wants to know what your thoughts are on that. And then also, you know, what are the tiers of danger? Because as we know, I mean, I buy a makeup that's free of all that stuff, and it's like $40 for a mascara. I mean, like, it's
that's too much money. You're spending
too much. Yeah. So give us some ideas about that.
Yeah. So first, Beauty Counter is great. Really love Beauty Counter. You know, I don't advocate or have financial arrangements with any of these companies.
Right.
You know, they're what I really like about them is they don't claim to be perfect. Right? They're like, look, this is a work in progress. We are doing as we're learning. Every time we find something new, like, we're evolving our product line. You know, I really like that approach, because there's a lot of companies that are like, we're non-toxic, we do this, like, we're cruelty free. And a lot of it is, especially in the direct sales field, there's a lot of BS. So there's only a handful of companies that, at least in the direct sales format, that I can sort of give my thumbs up for. Beauty Counter's one of them. There's a company out of the UK called Neil's Yard Remedies, which is really nice. But there's all kinds of in terms of the things to be mindful of, in terms of reading ingredients. The first, what I teach people is, you don't need to know every ingredient on the back of a label. I certainly don't. Some of these words are impossible to say. What you want to do is start looking out for keywords. The first one is fragrance. Okay. If any of your product has the word fragrance in it, or it can be displayed as perfume or parfum. It's sometimes spelled that way. While it's not an absolute guarantee, it is a very, very good indication that there are phthalates present. And phthalates are an endocrine disruptor, synthetic estrogen. They have a lot of the same health effects as BPA. Yep. And it's not the actual fragrance, it's a chemical in the fragrance, and it's actually spelled PHTA.
I know, I hit it 3 times and it kept spell checking. I'm like, forget it.
Oh yeah. Let's see. PHTHALATES.
Yeah, you do it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's phthalates. Pronounce it with a TH.
Okay.
Anyway, and so it's not in the it's not the fragrance, it's in the fragrance. So the word fragrance, so if we're looking at a package of chocolate chip cookies, and it's like, you know, flour, butter, eggs, sugar, chocolate chips, and then it'll say in parentheses, here are the ingredients in the chocolate chips. Okay, yes. Right? We know that. Yep. With personal care products, they don't have to do that. So they can say the word fragrance, and that actually means Kathy had pointed out natural flavor often is MSG. So they can do that to some extent in foods. But in personal care products, household cleaners, all these types of things, they just say the word fragrance, and that can actually be up to 300 different chemicals can be in that little word. So all of the compounds, synthetic or natural, that they've used to create the fragrance, and then they'll use phthalates, which serve as a fixative for the scent. It holds the scent together. It keeps it, you know, it's like an emulsifier almost. Yeah. So it's a fixative, and it also helps stay on your skin or your clothes or your hair. So, you know, when we're shampooing our hair in the morning and at 6 o'clock at night, you know, if somebody goes like this, flips their hair, and you can smell it as you walk past, it's probably because there's a high amount of phthalates in those products that have holding power. So,
Yeah.
recently I've seen a bunch of ads on TV for, I don't know if they're dryer sheets. It's some sort of laundry product that has these like release beads that like your clothes can smell for like months. And I'm like, well, that's creepy and chemically.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. So anyway, so phthalates is a keyword that I tell people to look out for. Just if you see, fragrance. If you see fragrance, put the product down, because already it's an indication that phthalates are present. A lot of natural, quote, natural products, because these are unregulated terms in personal care products. So is the term organic, by the way. They may use plant-based essential oils, but companies who know better will tell you what those oils are. If they just say natural fragrances, well, that doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. So unless they're clearly stating like these are the essential oils that we use, then I usually don't buy it. I'll skip it. So fragrance is one. Parabens is another. Anything that ends in the letters P-A-R-A-B-E-N, paraben. So ethyl paraben, methyl paraben, propyl paraben. These are preservatives that are used in personal care products and makeup. And they're also an endocrine disrupting chemical. So I usually just tell people, at least in the beginning, just look for those two words. And unfortunately, those two words tend to eliminate like 95% of the products that you would find in like a Target or a Walmart or a grocery store or Stop and Shop or something like that. Like most of those products are out the window. So when it comes to finding safer products, one, and this is a loose rule, not a hard rule, is go to the health food store. So there's like, health food stores are starting to stock these things. They've got, you know, decent margins. They, you know, are expanding larger and larger parts of their stores for health and beauty stuff. Because people want it, just because it's in a health food store is not a guarantee that the product is safe. So you still, as a consumer, have to do the due diligence to be able to read the labels. Environmental Working Group, in addition to their Dirty Dozen Clean 15 guide, has a personal care product guide on their website where it rates like 80,000 products on a 1 to 10 scale, 0 to 10, 0 being perfectly fine, 10 being super toxic. It's a rough guideline. It's not like the end all be all in terms of information, but it's pretty much the only comprehensive resource that we have. And you can actually go in and type in the name of a product. So if you are doing a client intake, which I encourage everybody to do, not just about like, you know, how many hours of sleep do you get and what do you eat in an average breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and, you know, all of those regular questions that you would ask in an intake. Ask them, you know, what do you do for a living? What does your spouse do for a living? What are the types of personal care products that you use? Please list them here.
So that's something we'll add, because my intake form that everyone gets a copy of, they get to use it. It's 14 pages long. So we cover almost everything. But one of the questions I actually covered the other day was I had added, about 4 years ago, have you ever worked around toxins, environmental toxins, or, you know, that I added that question in there. So adding the personal beauty question, because they get to customize this however they want to. They can
and you know, if you find out that somebody's spouse works at IKEA, right, then they're surrounded by chemicals that are off-gassing from those materials, and that, you know, like it depends on what the client niche is. So if somebody's working in the fertility or preconception space, definitely ask those questions about what spouses are doing or other members of the household are doing, because they can track in those chemicals on their clothes and all that stuff. Not everybody even knows that they may be exposed to an environmental toxin. So ask them, do you have pests in your house, like ants? Do you spray for them? You know, do you filter your drinking water? Do you store your food in plastic containers? Do you eat canned foods? These are all the types of questions that are really great to add to an intake, because it can give the practitioner a sense of like, just like, you know, you had that one client that had all these plastic cups, if you had known that like from day one, you would have been like, okay, let's look at
part
that.
of the picture. So yeah, so just for the students, just as an FYI, you guys, as you know, you can customize your intake form. So just put a bunch of space under that one question about environmental toxins and start adding those additional questions there so that you cover all of this. That's a great slot to add these additional questions in. So let me ask you, obviously we have questions here. One we forgot with Veronica. I put my Vitamix container many times in the dishwasher. Is this a future problem if I start washing it by hand? So has she damaged the Vitamix by heating it up in the dishwasher for the past few years, or is it?
You know, it's a little bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So sometimes, you know, there's not a period in time when we can say like, oh, well, I pulled out all of the bad chemicals because I washed it so many times.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a difference in terms of, you know, if you bought a new one, the exposure may not change at all. So I would just say going forward, like do the best you can. These are, I mean, I'll tell you that 2 years ago, my mom came out to visit me and I've had a Vitamix blender. At this point, I've had the same one for probably 9 years, 8 or 9 years.
Yeah.
And like, it was always perfect. Like, you know, like it wasn't all foggy and opaque. Like it looks almost new. And I prided myself on that because I hand washed it all the time. And I never scrubbed it and I never put anything really, really super abrasive in there. Anyway, my mom came and visited and she loves to cook. And she does a lot of really amazing raw food desserts, and she was doing something and she ground star anise, which is so hard, in my Vitamix, and I looked at it and the whole bottom part was like white and I was like, no.
You might as well throw in a freaking chestnut in there. I mean,
know, I was so upset. I was like, oh my God. And I immediately went on the Facebook group for my classes. Cause I was like, my people, you guys will know my pain.
Yes.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
I still have that same carafe. So I'm not going to spend the money on getting a new one. So I would just say going forward, just don't continue to do that.
Now that you know better, do better.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like, if that's like, again, the food that you're putting in them is probably super healthy, that's my guess. So just focus on that and just kind of let it go, because if we continue to have anxiety about those exposures that there's nothing we can do about, you're just going to become overwhelmed and anxious and neurotic. And I use the term detoxorexic, like obsessed with everything being toxic free. And like, that's just, you know, as I always tell people, our goal is not to have 100% toxic free lives, because it's just impossible. So somebody had put on the chat, like, what do you do about exposures you can't avoid, i.e. car interiors? Like, I let it go. I'm not going to start driving like a horse and buggy because, you know, like
I just got a new car, and every time I get in it, I think about you, honestly. Like 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I got in and I'm like, I don't really enjoy the smell. What would Lara say about this car right now? But, oh, it's so nice, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of studies that have been done on car interiors, and they're not good. You know, if you have a new car, you open the windows and you leave them open as much as possible.
Okay.
And, you know, it's real.
It was time for the new car, though, I'm just going to say.
Yeah, and that's, and again, like, let it air out as much as you can.
Okay.
And, you know, if you really wanted to go hog wild, you know, you could put a little container, plastic even, because if it's not in your food, don't worry about it, of like a bentonite clay, or something like that. You can also, I mean, I'm like, you can't put a house plant in your car. That would be great. Yeah, those are tricky.
I'm not going to worry too much about it then. I'm just going to enjoy the new car and open the moonroof and let it go.
But I want to mention about the product lines is I actually have a Pinterest board where I pin products that I like, which is easier than me trying to remember product line names.
Of course.
So it's just Lara Adler, or Pinterest.com/Lara Adler. Okay. And there's like products I love, and there's a like makeup and beauty care board, I think.
Is that it right there? Yep. Did I do that right?
Yep.
Okay, great.
So people can check those things out because those things change and evolve. And sometimes products like, the Ava Anderson line went away and rebranded as something else. And, so those old pins aren't, active anymore.
Right.
But there's all kinds of products that are, the mascara that I buy, by the way, which is by a company called Ecobella.
Yep.
I think it's like $8 or $9 and I love it.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I have some of their other stuff
for mascara.
It's good, but I don't wear it that often. So something to back down on. So we were definitely run over on time. And I just appreciate the fact that you have spent so much. I could talk to you for hours. Like I could bring up so many different, I'm not kidding. Like even all the way to like pet stuff. You know what I mean? Like talking to pets. I mean, I could go on and on. And I'm sure everyone else is too, because everybody's still sitting on the line. Sometimes people drop off, but this has been really, really helpful and really interesting. And I'm sure it's got people's brains just spinning even more about how they can take things further, because part of the process of helping our clients to be empowered is obviously educating them so that they can do this for themselves, providing them with those links to EWG so they know how to clean out their own house in the future, or they help their children or whatever it may be. So if someone is interested in taking this completely further and really going in depth with one of your programs, can you tell us a little bit about what you offer for coaches if they wish to go somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a number of courses that I teach. I have an introductory level course, which is mostly self-directed with some live Q&A calls, because this dialogue is super important. People need to be able to get on the phone and ask questions. So I actually did a Zoom call with my intro class yesterday. And so that's called Tools for Teaching Toxicity. And it's essentially like a 4-week, mostly self-directed program. I've had about maybe 800 or 900 people go through that course.
Awesome.
All practitioners, mostly health practitioners, like health coaches, because that's where I got my start. Mm-hmm. And if people want it, that's usually the place where I encourage people to start. Is just start there, because it really is the basics and the foundation.
And I'll share the link for that later, you guys, when I do.
I'm happy to give you guys like a 10% off promo code or coupon code for that course if you guys want to check it out. And I'll just use the promo code Carmen H. But I'll send all that stuff to you.
Okay.
So Teaching Toxicity is a intro course. I also have Blueprint for a Healthy Life, which is a 3-month intermediate course. That's the course where we're spending 2 weeks on drinking water and water filtration, and 2 weeks on seafood and seafood contamination, and hair dyes and nail polishes and deodorants and sunscreens and fragrances. So we're doing all of that in addition to having coaching calls, right? So that we can talk about how we apply and integrate this into our work. And then from there, I actually have a year-long intensive certification or certificate course in environmental health that runs once a year that people can check out as well if they really want this to be a significant portion of their practice. Meaning if they're working in the fertility market, or if they're working with moms, or if they really just want to stand up and be somebody who can stand up as an expert in this space. So
that would be awesome. And that would be like, I know there's some people out there that are so super passionate about this stuff. And that would be a great way to build to build a niche around that, and do community group talks and online group talks, and help people
absolutely
take it further.
Because people are so many of my clients have come back and said, I did this talk or I did this workshop, and when I got to the toxins part, people were like, what? And sitting on the edge of their seats and asking a million questions, because the reality is all of the awareness that's growing and all of the news articles where people are seeing, rates of autism increasing and childhood cancers increasing and stuff about chemicals in consumer products, and those articles are becoming more and more frequent. It's leaving people with a lot of anxiety and confusion and overwhelm, and not any action steps. So this is where health coaches come in. We already have this boots on the ground model where we're holding people by the hand and helping them navigate overwhelming situations, whether it's a celiac diagnosis or a diabetes diagnosis that they're trying to wiggle out of. So as boots on the ground practitioners, the more fluent that we can be in this subject that people are already tuned into to a certain extent and actually concerned about, but they have no idea who to talk to. So when like I said, my clients have said that when they're able to have the education and the confidence to stand up and talk about it, they get flooded with feedback and questions, and people who are like, oh my God, finally.
Yeah.
Finally.
And you know, and my mind's always spinning about how my students can make more money doing this, because one-on-ones, as we know, only goes so far.
Yes.
But you know, even creating a program for these people who are working in these highly toxic environments, they can't quit their jobs. There's no way that they can just quit and leave. How they can help to improve their life around their jobs would be at home, and what they're doing in their home, their own life, would be a powerful thing to offer to these big industries.
Yep. There's endless avenues. So somebody had posted about fertility and of course, menopausal issues in women. Of course, you know, anything that interferes with the hormonal system is going to affect that. There is also another course that I co-teach with Jessica Drummond, who I know you know.
She's going to be an expert for us, actually.
Oh, awesome.
Not long. Yeah, a couple weeks, I think.
Awesome. So we actually co-created a course called Optimal Fertility, Preconception, Preparedness, and Detoxification. So if there's anybody in your audience that really wants to have that be their niche.
I have a couple in my other group, actually, too.
Yeah, then definitely go and check out that course.
Send me the link for that, will you? When you send the information about this, include that, because I have some coaches that I brainstorm and I mentor, and I would love to share that with them. That would be
absolutely
awesome. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I just, thank you again for your time.
You are welcome.
Yeah, this has been really, I've learned things on here. Like I knew I would learn from you, but some of this I'm like, oh my gosh. So now it makes me want to, just pay closer attention to everything I'm doing in my own life. And I think that that's helpful sometimes too. When we get into these, in my opinion anyway, we get into these healthy lifestyles, we're eating primal, we're having fun, we're working on our relationship to stress. It's good to check back in with ourselves and say, what have we kind of maybe eased up a little bit on? You know what I mean? What maybe could we check back in on? And this is one area that I need to do for myself.
Well, what I love about this conversation is when people make changes, healthier changes about the products that they're using, they don't really think about it afterwards. Like if somebody's trying to change their diet and there's emotional eating stuff, like that's a constant, ongoing, lifelong dialogue that somebody's having. When somebody swaps out all the plastic for glass in their house, you're done. You don't think about it anymore. Like,
it's not like you're going to buy plastic ever again. Be like, oh, I need to replace those beautiful glasses with some plastic. No.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that. And like, sometimes people ask me like, this is such an overwhelming topic. Like, how do you not like pull your hair out? And I say, well, because, I'm drinking out of a glass mason jar with a glass drinking straw. And like, I don't think about it. Like, this is what I have.
Yeah.
So
there's affordable ways to do this too. A mason jar, that's what I use for my soup, my glasses, my kid drinks out of them. There are affordable ways to make these changes. $8 mascara instead of $39 mascara, which I'm ashamed to even say that I use now, but it was a splurge. So so there's things we can do, and we can help to end the overwhelm for people too. So
awesome.
Thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
Thank you everybody who joined us.
Thanks everyone for your questions.
Appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Okay.
Lauren. All right.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everybody.